Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Bond, and I'm a professor of English at Bakersfield College. And I want to welcome you to the last event of our AAPI one-day conference, celebrating AAPI Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. For this part of the presentation, we've invited Portia Choi, who is a local Bakersfield poet. She's kind of a fixture in a lot of the poetry circles locally. If you've ever gone to any poetry workshops or readings at Dagny's, for instance, you might have seen her around or run into her. Very kind of common to see her around the arts scene in Bakersfield in general. But Portia has a really interesting history in that she was born in Korea and she actually lived through the Korean War in her early childhood. In fact, she didn't immigrate to the US until she was 8 years old, and I believe that was about 3 years after the Korean War finished. And during that period, her family lived in abject poverty. They experienced homelessness. And so there were a lot of experiences in her childhood that influenced her poetry, which is autobiographical in nature. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to Portia, and she'll just tell me what poem she wants up at any given time. And she'll be commencing in readings and maybe even speaking about the experiences that inspired the poem. And maybe even, talk a little bit more about herself and her life here in Bakersfield. So Portia, are you ready?
Yes, I am. After World War II, there was a powers to be decided to cut Korea, which is one country, into half. The communist powers to the north and the Democratic parties to the south in 1985. My parents and my older sister were both born in North Korea. I was born later in South Korea. When I was 2, the Korean War happened very suddenly. The Korean War has been called a conflict, never called a war, and also called the forgotten war, because people did not want to have another war after World War II. So it was when I was 2 years old when the war happened very suddenly, and my mother came one day and told my sister, myself, and our teenage help in the house that we have to go on a trip very fast. And there we were on the road walking. My mother, my older sister, 4 years. I was 2 years old at the time. We became homeless refugees among millions of others who were in the same situation. There were many casualties of this war, both the soldiers and civilians. So I will start to read with one of the first poems. It is called Tear or Tear. They have both meanings. Tear, 38th parallel, a line on a map, a simple line in a small country. A clean cut divides the spoils of war, the north to one power, the south to the other. A not so simple dismembering of families, wife, husband, son, mother, brother, sister, a hand in the north, a leg in the south. The heart pumping Kim, Ri, Pak, Kang, Che blood, drip, drip, dripping on the dirt, in the streams flowing over borders, in the land of the morning calm. Over 1,000 days of Korean War, a woman screaming, her husband dragged away, her infant frozen and dead, no place to rest, no rice to eat. A little girl looking around, gunshots, scattering birds, splattering humans. I weep for my country torn apart by a line. Years and years pass, gathering now the pieces of memory. We exhume the dead, we exhume and release shame, guilt, pain, release the uneasy spirits buried in the ever-present deathliness of walking, taking the threads of our memories, knowing that we were there together. Now mending the tears in our hearts, the tears in our hearts, mending the legs and arms severed and buried, remembering gentle swaying breeze of cosmos and leaves, whispering sorrow in the land of the morning calm, finding the persons we were there together during a time, sharing the land, sharing our lives, living now, we surviving, each one of us, remembering missing parts left in Korea, an extended family, a war buddy, we each surviving the days of the war. And the first poem that I wrote in my 20s was a following poem about rice. I remember that my mother would leave me to go ahead to look for safety for us. And I felt alone with a little ball of rice. My ball of rice, nice, warm, light, and bright. Where is mother? Where is sister? Gone, alone. And so when I was young, in those times, my mother had made me a doll called Oksun, my doll. And I used to be called Oksun's mother because I would carry this doll everywhere in the refugee camps and in the small settlements that we were at. So I will now recite that poem. Oksun, you are my love. You make me smile, Oksun, my dear Oksun. Dressed in silk stripes of grass green, tomato red, a butterfly yellow, cloud white and sky blue. Your slips sewn together of tattered, thrown away clothes. I find a torn piece of red balloon among pebbles and dirt near the chain fence. I suck a circle into my mouth. Out pops a rounded, shiny ball. My teeth rub back and forth, squeaking the balloon, the rubber. And it becomes a balloon for you, Oksun, your balloon. I am your mother, Oksun. I will protect and hide you from the soldiers. I will look for you so you cannot see the shattered arms. I will cuddle you to sleep so you cannot hear the cries. I protect you. You know, Oksun, I am frightened of the night. I think that dying man may grab for me in the dark. I will hide you, Oksun. No one will take you from me. I feed you a kernel or two of rice. I find one stuck on your cheek. Just a kernel, dry from yesterday's dinner. You are very lucky, Oksun, having rice 2 days in a row. You are very smart too, saving one for tomorrow. Yes, Oksun, who knows when we will eat again. Oksun, the sun is out. There is clovers among the grass. See, I made a bracelet for you and a ring for me. The white crescent flowers and the 3 leaves playing together. I throw you up in the sky, you fall face down in my palms. I throw you again, you fall with your back down. Fly higher and higher, Oksun. You are with me and I am with you. I am your mother, Oksun, my love, my doll. The next poem has to do with my mother, and it's called Escape. My parents both became Christians and worked in the church. The Protestant Christians, when they came to Korea, built schools, universities. Education was very important. They built hospitals and provided health care. And so my parents were very impressed, very influenced. And so they both worked in the church. However, the communists did not like Christians, and especially my mother, who had a husband who liked to speak English, had books in English, and actually was in America to study further for the ministry. And so my mother was taken away somewhere with other Christians, and she was gone longer than usual. And my mother would tell me this story many times. So here it is about her escape. My head nestled on Mama's arm, and she told me about the war. She said, "Your face, just to see your face again, kept me walking. I was being pushed up a hill with others, other Christians, wrist tied in a rope. All I could do was pray. And I remembered the verse in Romans, in all things look to God. And I witnessed to the soldier that Jesus died for us, all of us, him too. Jesus had forgiven us of any wrongdoing. Just believe in him and his goodness." The soldiers told me to be quiet, just such nonsense. I just kept praying, then humming sweet hymns. "Lord, lead me unto higher grounds." The soldier angered. He was at the tail end of the group. At the top of the hill, he told me to go down the hill quietly, to run away fast. Some of the others I heard were beaten and killed. That soldier let me go. I am here with you. I remember that time. Mama showed up after a long while. I remember her smile, tears, how she moved so slowly. And now there were others who were in the war. And I seem to remember noticing other women, other children. We not only walked, but we also rode on the train. And this next poem is called Going on the Train. Remembering Sungsook in the field picking clover, white flowers with pink tips and green leaves with white strokes in her little hand, giving to me. Sweet, so sweet. This little girl now staring at me. I had taken out my yam, munch on it, and a little rice, taken out from a cloth bundle. Those eyes gaunt, look at me. Oh, the food I could give her. A little, no, she is not my girl. I need this for me to live and get to where? She is staring at me, she is crying. No, this food is for me to live. Oh, but she looks like Sungsook. Sungsook, my girl, I had buried her. When I was in Los Angeles, I met Korean veterans, and one is the next poem. I also met in Bakersfield a veteran named Neil Vance. He was able to enlist in the army. He was only 17 and a half years old. If his parents gave me permission, and he was given permission to join. And he joined the army with several of his fellow students from Bakersfield. So this is the poem about it's about Neil Vance. There were 5 from Bakersfield, Eddie, Jack, John, Neil, and Richard. All 5 went to fight in a conflict between democracy and communism. Assigned to the 3rd Battalion of the 29th Infantry Regiment of the 24th Division. All 5 were ambushed at Hadong Pass at the southern tip of Korea. 4 of the 5 were killed that day, with 313 others. There were also 100 captured and 24 missing in action. Neil Vance survived. He was on the ground, bullets, bodies all around, dirt blowing into his eyes, tears flowing. He wondered, am I blind? Why did my mother let me go? He combat crawled from under bodies and ran to a river. He saw 2 American soldiers. They found a small opening, ran to a road and hailed an American Jeep. Neil followed the North Korean communists all the way to the Yalu River, just a few miles from the Manchurian border. Then the Chinese kept coming and coming like a tidal wave. He had an M1 rifle, but could not get the clips out of the cloth bandolier fast enough. He swung that rifle like a baseball bat, remembering the hand-to-hand combat the Turkish soldiers taught him. The fighting went back and forth around the 38th parallel. Neil survived to receive the Purple Heart twice and the Bronze Star. He lives in Bakersfield. Days are quiet. Nights are filled with memories. His home has 3 flags in the front. The American flag, POW, prisoners of war, and KIA, killed in action. After the war, I used to go to parks, and there were veterans, Korean veterans, and during the war too. So this poem is about 3 post-war games and 1 rule. 1, Korean jacks, pebbles found in the dirt, our eyes stung by the dust of army jeeps. 2, torn, thin rubber makes tiny balloons that squeak when squeezed on teeth. 3, we play chase in the park with limbs broken from tree as we watch legless soldiers piggyback on their friends. Rule, never use branches as guns. And so, towards the end of the war, when my mother didn't have any money, she would write to our father in America to send things so she could sell for us to survive. And this poem is called Face Powder. And you will see from the poem why it's called the Face Powder. Mother slowly shuffled in, her arms around a big box and our helper lifting the other end. Mother smiled excitedly, a smile that I did not often see. With scissors and a knife, she slid open the flaps and brought out round powder boxes. Orange, gold, and white cylinders wrapped in clear paper, so pretty and bright, and pictures of powder puffs of lightness. Mother said, "These will sell, and for a good price, better than pencils," Mother whispered. "The young single ones and even the mild grandmothers will want them." I asked, "Mama, what are they for?" Mama replied, "They are for the ladies to make them pretty." I remembered at the refugee camp, a lady slowly taking out a compact and dabbing her face, putting powder on her nose, forehead, chin, and cheek. She studied her face, turning side to side, and scrunched her mouth. It made her face look lighter and chalky. Mama said, "These will bring in the money." I remember the day I went to see that lady in the big house on the hill. People said she has money, and if you ask humbly, I went to see her, but the way she looked at me, I just couldn't ask. Even though we were hungry, I prayed while walking back. That's when I thought of going to the missionaries to contact your father in America. I wrote him, and at first he sent me pencils. Then the lady said, "Send for face powder, lipstick, anything to make us beautiful and feel luxurious. This is what your father sent." Mama kept taking on more and more of the orange gold white powder boxes. At the bottom of the big box was candy, green, yellow, and red, and a letter from Papa. After the war and before we came to United States, we went to live with my mother's parents, my grandmother and grandfather, and there was our uncle. He was my mother's half sister. My mother was his half sister. Our uncle was our half brother, but he was a little older than my older sister. He was like a brother. And there was also a great grandmother who I felt very close to. And during the spring, we would go out and pick flowers, and Bouquet of Spring Promises is a reminder of that times, those fun times of being out in the countryside, picking flowers, and how I would bring home Bouquet of Spring Promises for my mother. And those were the happiest time that I had in Korea as a child. Until I came to United States, and that's whole another chapter of my life. Here it is, Bouquet of Spring Promises. Awakened from spring drowsiness, toasty warm within quilts warmed by the ondo floor, a floor heated by the ashes of coal and wood, pushed in from the kitchen hearth. Mother chided us to dress and go into the hill to bring home the tender herbs to make namer, a salad mixed with sesame oil and vinegar. Grimacing into cold dresses, we gulped the warm, steaming rice with pieces of salted black beans and bites of radish kimchi. Slipping on our rubber shoes, we ran through the front door yard, scattered cackling chickens and dodged bell-clacking goats. Pushing open the massive wooden door into the field, we ran looking at two girls swinging higher and higher, standing together in a wooden sled, heads thrust back upwards the sky of apple blossoms. We rushed through gardens reeking with night soil, filled with green onion and lettuce. We balanced with outstretched arms on mounds dividing the rice paddies. Up the hill, scampering zigzag to outwit snakes, we picked stooped poppies, calling them grandmothers. Finding the green sprigs, we pinch the tops or pull the entire plant of leaves, roots, and clinging dirt. We rush back to mother, our hands full with bouquet of spring promises. I thought I'd end my reading with that poem, my memories a few years before coming to United States.
So we can open up the floor to Q&A a little bit. If there's any one particular poem that someone wants me to go back to, if they had a question about it. So I wanted to ask if you could explain to the audience what the concept of Han is in Korean kind of culture, and how that influences maybe your identity as a Korean American and also your poetry.
The Han name is a elevated form of the Korean people. Han tends to be, I don't want to say upper class, or Koreans are, even though Koreans are unique about Korean culture is that we are peasants, to be quite frank with you. But they love to be connected with the Han culture, which is actually more connected with the Chinese culture, the educated, the more of a sort of an upper class. So they love to think that Koreans are Han people. Their Korean outfit is called Hanbok, and their Korean language is called Hanguk. But Koreans are peasants. We're farmers. We're close to the dirt. And I didn't realize this until I came to United States. And I'm married to a Chinese person. And this whole thing about Confucianism, Confucius was Chinese. And the Koreans, if you were educated, let me just go back to the Korean language. The Hangul, which is the Korean phonetic language, is totally phonetic. One of our emperors got his scholars together and said to his scholars, I don't like it that Koreans, 90% of his people are illiterate. The 10% who went and educated and learned the Chinese characters called Hanmun could read. And so he said to his scholars, find me a language, a phonetic language, so that all my people can read and write. It's important that they become literate. So Hangul was established. So even when I was still in Korea, the newspapers, we had to all learn the Korean Hangul and Hanmun. Luckily, I didn't have to go to school because we thought we were coming to United States. So I actually had only 1 or 2 years of elementary grammar school, and so I never learned Hanmun. But it wasn't until about 10, 20 years ago that all students had to learn the Korean characters, because some of the concepts are only understood in the Chinese characters Hanmun. And by the way, about English, all Korean kids had to learn English for everyone. English is the international language. Other country students have to learn English. So about me being Korean American, that's a complex question. I love Korean food, kimchi. That's that pickled, spicy, full of garlic. That's for Koreans, you have to have kimchi. It's stinky as all get out, full of garlic, but we love it. And we love that smelly sesame oil. Oh, I love that smell. My kids, my husband, my children love Korean food. Is that true, Martin?
Yes, my favorite food.
Yes. So our children are half Chinese and half Korean, but they love Korean food. And my poetry, I started really writing poetry in my 20s. And with a bowl of rice, it just came to me and I wrote it. In high school, I had an wonderful English teacher who gave me the love of poetry. And I started writing poems. And now I am retired from a career in medicine, public health. And my avocation is to be involved in poetry because it brought me back memories of being in the Korean War, gave me a life back of memories. Well, I'm getting too psychological and philosophical here. Does that answer your question, Professor Bond?
Yeah, that was fine. Oliver Rosales asked a question. He says, what recommendations does Portia have for people in Bakersfield to explore the history and culture of Asian Americans in this city?
For Asian culture, for the Chinese in particular, there is a Bakersfield Chinese Women's Club. I am a member of that, and I was able to join because I'm married to a Chinese. Also, I'm on the board of Bakersfield Sister City, and it was formed by Eisenhower, but just briefly, Bakersfield, the honorary chairperson is mayor of the city, Mayor Go. And we have a sister city in Korea, in China, and in Japan, as well as in India. You are welcome to give out my email, ssportia@aol.com. And there is a Korean American association. On the board of the sister cities is several Korean members, as well as Chinese, East Indian, Japanese, and I will just have to find out and look around. Oh, I must mention this. This is November the 13th. They're having a garden party at the Sister City Peace Monument. It's right at the, where the Central Park is, the Mill Creek Central Park next to the museum. And they're going to have a Sister City Garden event there. And this is like our third one. I believe it's a wonderful event. Culture, in previous years, the Korean culture had drums, young people doing drums. The East Indians, particularly the Punjab, they did dancing in their original costume. There was lion dance by the Chinese, and I was in a table providing information about the Chinese culture, and it's all about the various cultures that we have in the sister city. Some of the other sister cities are from Mexico. We have one from France, our city is famous for the B sound. The Bakersfield and the lamb, they like lamb, Tim, Martin, you know who I'm talking about, right? Well, we are known, Bakersfield is known for their famous restaurants like Wool Grower, and they make
the Basque food.
Yes, Basque food, yes. We have a sister city that's technically in France, but it's a Basque relationship. And let me see, what are some of the other countries? That's another place that you could learn about the culture, is that I'm sure for the Asian culture, there is, I would think there's a Japanese association. Oh, on some of the campuses, well, Professor Bond, I met you because you have a Korean K-pop group on campus, yes?
Well, we did have the Korean Culture Club because a few students interested in K-pop came to me when they found out that I taught Korean language for a couple of years at UCR. But it's been a few years since it's been active because the students who were really interested in it and really did the work to run the club graduated. One of them went out to UCLA and others have scattered all over. I did want to ask you one question about the poetry community in Bakersfield, because I've seen you many times at Dagny's, at poetry workshops, chatting with other poets, listening to poetry readings. I was just wondering if you could talk about your experiences in that poetry community in Bakersfield and how people might be how people might get involved in that if they're interested.
Oh, perfect question. We've been doing First Friday open mic for a number of years, and we are doing it currently by Zoom. You could email me, the co-host, actually the person who's hosting, Carla Martin, if she is still on, but you could get in contact with me. We do First Friday open mic currently by Zoom. We used to do it at Dagny for a number of years, and there were others who used to host it at Barnes & Noble, and I also hosted it at Russo's bookstore. When it was in the marketplace. I have a website, not I, but our community of poets has a website called Kern Poetry. Simple, KERNPOETRY.com, Kern Poetry, which my son actually put it together. He did everything. He was the photographer at the events. He wrote it. He actually went to Bakersfield College in journalism major, and he convinced me after retirement to take a basic journalism class because he said I could use to improve my writing. Can you believe this? And it has improved my writing for our site. And oh, there are lots of things going on in poetry now, even beyond what I do. We've had a Nobel, poet laureate for Kern County. The first one poet was Don Thompson, who's been writing about our area of the valley for 50 years. Our current poet laureate is Matthew Woodman. He's at CSUB, and he's always involved. And then we have, when we open up our open mic, when we did it in person, let me stay in the present moment and tell you we're doing it by Zoom. Our next First Friday open mic is on June, I believe, the 5th. And everyone's welcome. It's lots of fun. Last time we actually had 3 poets singing. So there was music, and it has to be original poetry, original songs and lyrics is the only thing that we request.
Awesome. And just to clarify, Susan Stone is in the audience, and she wanted us to let people know that the Gardens Festival is November 13th, and it's on 18th Street near Mexicali, and that's going to be the Sister City Garden Festival. And then also she clarified that the sister city in the Basque region is Saint-Jean-de-Luz, which is in France. I guess it's just on the French side of that border area. So let me just check. Do we have any last questions anyone would like to ask of Portia before we wrap up? Portia, do you have any last things that you want to say?
Andrew.
Oh, yeah, Nicole.
Oliver asked in the chat if Portia could say a little something about the photograph that's on the title slide here.
The photo that the one with you and Carol.
Oh, okay. The photo was taken of us when we were in fact in Korea. The person in the middle is my mother. And to the left is my older sister, Sungjin. Her name is Carol. And I'm on the right, Sungsook Portia. And we're all wearing hanbok. You know, in Korea, when we were young, the women, you know, Korean outfit is just one style. The only difference is the type of material that it's made of, plain cotton, linen, or very expensive silk. One style. Get that, women? One style. And the skirts were always long. They could be a little bit shorter if you were in the field. But to the fanciest party, it's still the same style, just more expensive material. So that's the photo. Thank you for asking.
And how old were you in that photo?
Oh, my guess is maybe 5. Maybe towards the end of the war is my guess. Maybe 4.
Yeah, it's a very interesting photo, and we're fortunate that Portia allowed us to use it for the promotional materials for the event tonight. So Portia, do you have any last things that you want to tell the audience before we wrap up?
Well, thank you so much for joining. So I get to share with you my life. And I'm just one person among billions, and we're all unique and wondrous, and as each one of you are. So thank you for joining and listening to my life.
And I'll mention too that Portia's book of poetry on her experiences as a child in the Korean War, and also that have poems reflecting veteran experiences. The book is available through online retailers. So if you're interested in purchasing it, you can get it. And I'm sure if you show up to a poetry reading and open mic in person when we're able to do so, and you bring that book with you, she will sign it for you.
Of course, I would be most happy to sign it and to get to meet you. Or if I don't get to meet you, at least know your name. Yes.
All right. So I think, let me just check the chat because it's going off here a little bit. So we have a lot of people thanking you and saying that your poems were empowering and inspirational. You know, they brought very interesting accounts of, you know, your childhood perspective, but knowing too that you were writing them later in life is interesting, because there comes with age that ability to reflect and think outside of the perspective of maybe the child you were when you were originally experiencing the war. So I just want to thank you, Portia, for being here and joining us, and thank the audience as well for being here, because you know, this is the I believe the first time that BC is celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we wanted to make sure that even though it's finals week, we got we had a celebration, and we hope that everything's going well with all of you in these trying times, and we encourage everyone to get vaccinated if you have not done so yet. Thank you, Portia.
Thank you so much. Thank you.